The vanishing colony. The mining colony on LV-746 had gone silent. No distress calls, no transmissions, just complete radio silence. For a thriving outpost of over 100 workers, this was unnatural. The United Earth Navy dispatched the frigate Vanguard to investigate. Captain Elias Carter stood on the bridge, staring at the cold, lifeless planet below. No signs of activity. Lieutenant Ramirez, the comms officer, shook her head. "Nothing, sir. No heat signatures, no movement. Just emptiness." Carter frowned. "We'll take a team down. Something isn't right." The Vanguard shuttle descended through the planet's thick, dust-filled atmosphere. The colony came into view, a series of metal structures built into the rocky surface, floodlights flickering weakly. There was no sign of life. The landing ramp lowered, and Carter stepped out with his team of heavily armed Marines. "Keep your eyes open." The colony was disturbingly quiet. Equipment lay scattered, doors hung open, and meals sat untouched on tables. It looked as if everyone had simply walked away. Sergeant Kane knelt beside a dropped datapad, its screen cracked. No signs of a fight. No blood. No bodies. "That makes it worse," Carter muttered. He gestured to the team. "Sweep the area. Check life support, power systems, and any logs you can find." As the Marines moved deeper into the facility, they found strange markings on the walls. At first, they looked like burn marks, but under closer inspection, they pulsed faintly. "What the hell is this?" Private Lewis asked, touching the surface. The thin, organic membrane shifted beneath his fingers. He yanked his hand back. "Sir, I think the walls are alive." Before anyone could respond, a sound echoed through the corridors. A deep, clicking noise, almost like distant whispers. "Movement," Ramirez called out. Her scanner picked up something below them. Something big. They followed the readings to the lower levels, where they discovered a massive hole in the floor. The tunnel stretched deep into the rock, lined with the same pulsating material. "This wasn't dug by human hands," Kane said, aiming his rifle at the opening. A deep growl rumbled from the darkness. "Back up," Carter ordered. The team slowly retreated, weapons raised. Then something moved. A shadow darted through the tunnel, too fast to see clearly. Then another, and another. Contact. Lewis screamed as something lunged from the hole. The creature was nightmarish. Black, chitinous, with multi-jointed limbs and razor-sharp appendages. It slammed into Lewis, dragging him into the tunnel before he could fire. "Open fire," Carter yelled. Gunfire erupted. Muzzle flashes lit up the corridor, revealing dozens of creatures crawling from the depths. Their black eyes reflected the light, soulless and predatory. "We need to move now," Ramirez shouted, pulling Carter back. The Marines fought their way out, but the creatures were fast. They didn't just attack, they learned. Each time a Marine fired, the creatures adapted, dodging and countering with deadly efficiency. By the time the team reached the surface, only half of them remained. "Fall back to the shuttle," Carter commanded. As the ramp closed, the last thing Carter saw was the swarm pouring out of the tunnels, their hunger undeniable. The Hive had awakened. On the Vanguard, the crew analyzed the ground team's footage. The creatures weren't just animals. They were organized, coordinated. "We aren't dealing with just a few predators," Ramirez whispered. "This is a hive, and we just woke it up." Carter stared at the screen, watching the creatures move like a single mind. "Then we need to warn Earth." But deep below the surface, the Hive was already preparing for war. The first battle. The warning ignored. The Vanguard sped through the void, escaping LV-746. Captain Elias Carter stood on the bridge, his face tense. The footage of the Hive creatures played on the main screen. Their black, chitinous bodies moved like liquid shadows, their soulless eyes reflecting the muzzle flashes of desperate gunfire. Lieutenant Ramirez broke the silence. "Message sent, sir. High Command should receive our transmission in an hour. Carter nodded. They need to understand the threat. If this hive spreads, it could wipe out entire colonies. An hour later, the response arrived. The hologram of Admiral Hastings flickered to life. Captain Carter, your report is concerning. But let's be clear, there is no evidence these creatures pose a real threat. Mining colonies suffer accidents all the time. Accidents. Carter's voice was sharp. We lost half our team. These things are intelligent, organized. They didn't just attack. They learned. Hastings sighed. We'll send a scout team to confirm your findings. Until then, Vanguard is to hold position near LV 746. Carter clenched his fists. They didn't understand. But before he could argue, alarms blared. The hive strikes. Multiple contacts incoming. Ramirez shouted. They're coming from the planet. On the screen, dark shapes burst from the surface of LV 746. They moved fast. Biomechanical creatures with wings, their bodies designed for space travel. The hive wasn't waiting. It was hunting. Battle stations. Carter roared. The Vanguard's weapons came to life, firing beams of energy and railgun rounds at the approaching swarm. Explosions bloomed in the void as the first wave was torn apart. But they kept coming. The creatures adapted mid-flight, twisting and dodging with impossible speed. They slammed into the ship's hull, clawing at the metal, looking for a way inside. They're breaching the lower decks. Sergeant Kane's voice came over the comms. They're inside. Carter grabbed his rifle. Seal off sections. We hold the bridge at all costs. In the corridors, chaos erupted. The creatures tore through Marines, moving too fast to track. Gunfire echoed as soldiers fought desperately. One Marine screamed as a hive warrior speared him through the chest, lifting him like a ragdoll before tossing his lifeless body aside. We're being overrun. Ramirez shouted. The sacrifice. Carter knew they wouldn't last. The hive was too fast, too smart. There was only one option left. Prepare for reactor overload, he ordered. The bridge crew froze. Ramirez's eyes widened. Sir, that'll destroy the whole ship. And take the hive with it, Carter said grimly. We don't have a choice. The AI system confirmed the sequence. Core overload initiated. Detonation in 5 minutes. Everyone to the escape pods, Carter shouted. Move. The crew ran, fighting through the creatures as they scrambled for survival. The hive sensed the change. They screamed in unison, attacking with renewed fury. Carter covered the retreat, firing until his rifle overheated. Go, he yelled at Ramirez, shoving her into a pod. She reached for him. Sir. No time. He slammed the hatch shut. The pod fired into space. The last thing Carter saw was the hive swarming toward him. A terrifying sight. From the safety of her pod, Ramirez watched as the Vanguard exploded in a blinding flash, tearing through the attacking swarm. For a moment, she thought it was over. Then she saw it. From the wreckage, the hive creatures floated toward the debris, consuming it. Their bodies changed, adapting, growing stronger. Ramirez's breath caught in her throat. They're evolving. As her pod drifted toward a distant human colony, she knew one thing for certain. This war had just begun. War declared. Proof and panic. The escape pod drifted through the void, carrying Lieutenant Ramirez and the few remaining survivors of the Vanguard. Their faces were grim as they neared Earth's military command on the lunar base Fort Resolute. The moment Ramirez stepped off the pod, officers swarmed her. She barely had time to catch her breath before being rushed to the command center. On a massive screen, the footage played, grainy but unmistakable. The hive, the massacre, the Vanguard's destruction. Admiral Hastings watched in silence, his jaw clenched. Other officers murmured in disbelief. Then Ramirez dropped the real bombshell. They're evolving. A deep silence filled the room. Finally, Hastings spoke. Lieutenant, Do you have any proof? Ramirez slammed her data pad onto the table. Scans of the Hive creatures before and after the battle. They absorbed the wreckage of our ship. Their bodies changed. They adapted. And if they're left unchecked, they'll spread. The room erupted into chaos. Hastings turned to his officers. Get me the president, and inform the United Earth Navy. This is no longer a containment mission. This is war. The Hive expands. As Earth's leaders debated their next move, the Hive was already advancing. On the colony world Arden VII, the sky darkened as strange, insectoid creatures descended from space. They moved in swarms, attacking without mercy. The colony's defense forces fought back, but the creatures adapted, their bodies growing resistant to bullets and plasma blasts. Within hours, Arden VII had fallen. Across the galaxy, distress signals flooded Earth's military channels. Colonies were vanishing. Ships were going silent. The Hive wasn't just attacking. It was spreading like a virus, consuming everything in its path. Admiral Hastings slammed his fist onto the table. Enough. We hit back now. The counterattack. The United Earth Navy assembled a massive fleet. Hundreds of warships gathered at Fort Resolute, ready to strike. Their target, LV-746, the planet where it all began. If they could burn the Hive at its source, they might stand a chance. Aboard the UN Retribution, the fleet's flagship, Ramirez suited up. She wasn't just a survivor. She was a soldier, and she was going to make the Hive pay. Jump in 5 minutes, the comms officer announced. Ramirez gripped her rifle, her heart pounding. This was humanity's first counterattack. They had one chance to stop the Hive before it became unstoppable. The bombardment. The fleet emerged from hyperspace above LV-746. The planet was unrecognizable. Black, pulsating structures covered the surface, twisting and expanding like a living organism. The Hive had transformed the world into its nest. Open fire, Admiral Hastings ordered. From orbit, Earth's warships unleashed hell. Plasma lances, kinetic bombardments, and nuclear warheads rained down. The Hive screamed as entire sections of the planet were obliterated. But then, something changed. The Hive adapted. Bioorganic spires erupted from the surface, spewing swarms of creatures that hurled themselves at the fleet. Ships exploded as the Hive's weapons, grown from their very bodies, struck back. Ramirez fired at the creatures boarding her ship, her mind racing. They're learning. They're fighting back. And deep below the surface of LV-746, something massive stirred. The war had only just begun. The Hive's true power. Infiltration. The strike team moved in silence, their armored boots barely making a sound on the twisted organic surface beneath them. They had one mission: infiltrate the Hive's core and plant an antimatter bomb to end the war before it truly began. Captain Darnell led the team, his pulse steady despite the horrors surrounding them. Black, pulsating walls loomed over them, shifting as if alive. Strange, clicking noises echoed through the tunnels, growing louder. Ramirez tightened her grip on her rifle. I don't like this. Stay sharp, Darnell whispered. We plant the bomb and get out. Quick and clean. But as they ventured deeper, they realized nothing about this mission would be clean. The horrors within. The first sign of the Hive's true horror came when they stumbled upon the cocoons. Row after row of human bodies were suspended in thick, translucent sacs, faces contorted in agony, eyes fluttering, as if trapped between life and death. They're still alive, Ramirez whispered, her stomach twisting. What the hell are they doing to them? A scientist on the team scanned the nearest cocoon. His face went pale. They're changing them. Suddenly, one of the cocoons burst open. A human. At least, what was once human, fell to the ground. Its body was twisted, limbs elongated, skin dark and chitinous. It twitched violently before letting out an unearthly screech. The Hive was turning prisoners into their own. The Queen revealed. "Move. Now," Darnell shouted, firing at the transformed creature. The team sprinted down the corridors, their rifles blazing. But then the clicking noises stopped. A deep, reverberating hum filled the air. The Hive was aware of them. They turned a corner and stopped dead. In the center of a vast, pulsating chamber sat the Queen. Towering over them, her chitinous body glistened in the eerie glow of the Hive's bioorganic structures. Her many eyes gleamed with intelligence far beyond the mindless drones. She exuded power, her very presence pressing against their skulls like a living nightmare. Ramirez clutched her helmet. "She's in my head." The Queen tilted her head, her mandibles twitching. And then, in a voice that resonated directly in their minds, she spoke. "You are too late." The Hive around them came alive. The escape. "Fall back," Darnell roared, hurling a grenade as creatures poured from the walls. The explosion rocked the chamber, but the Queen remained unfazed. The team fought their way back through the tunnels, but the Hive was relentless. Their escape route was cut off. One by one, soldiers were dragged into the shadows, their screams vanishing into the endless tunnels. Ramirez and a handful of others reached the extraction point, panting and bloodied. As they boarded their ship, she slammed the detonator switch, only to see an error flash across the screen. The bomb had been disabled. The Queen had known. As they fled into space, Ramirez looked back at the writhing planet below. The mission had failed, but they had gathered crucial data. And humanity now knew what they were truly up against. The weakness. The war against the Hive had pushed humanity to the brink. The alien creatures were relentless, spreading like a plague across the galaxy. Every battle drained Earth's forces. Every victory felt temporary. But now, for the first time, humanity had hope. Deep inside an underground research facility, top scientists worked tirelessly to study the Hive. Captured specimens had been dissected, their genetic structure analyzed. The answer they had been searching for finally emerged. The Hive was not an ordinary species. It did not function like a simple swarm of mindless insects. It had a ruler, a queen. Dr. Ethan Cole, the lead scientist, stood before a room full of military leaders and strategists. His voice was calm but urgent. The Hive operates under a single consciousness. Every soldier, every drone, every creature is connected through a telepathic link. This link comes from one source, the Queen. The room fell silent as the weight of his words sank in. General Marcus Kane leaned forward. "Are you saying if we kill the Queen, the Hive will fall apart?" Dr. Cole nodded. "Yes. Without her, they become nothing more than confused, leaderless animals. Their entire civilization depends on her survival." Admiral Sarah Leo crossed her arms. "And where is this Queen?" Cole hesitated. "On their homeworld, a planet we've identified as Sifos Prime." A hushed murmur spread across the room. Sifos Prime was deep in enemy territory, heavily fortified, and guarded by an entire Hive armada. Reaching it would be nearly impossible. Kane's voice was firm. "Then we have no choice. We send a team in, take her out, and end this war." The plan. A special operations team was assembled, experts in infiltration, sabotage, and survival. They were handpicked for this mission, knowing full well the risks. If they succeeded, humanity would be saved. If they failed, the Hive would consume Earth next. Captain Ryan Walker led the team. A hardened soldier with years of experience, he had fought the Hive on multiple planets. His team included Lieutenant Avatoris, a sharpshooter, Sergeant Logan Reed, a demolition expert, and Dr. Helena Voss, a xenobiologist who understood the Hive better than anyone. Their plan was simple in theory but deadly in execution. Using a stealth ship, they would infiltrate Sifos Prime, navigate through the dangerous terrain, locate the Queen's chamber, and eliminate her. But nothing about this mission was easy. As the team prepared, the rest of the fleet gathered for the final assault. The largest armada in human history was about to take the fight directly to the Hive. It was a battle that would decide the fate of Earth. The revelation. Just as the fleet was preparing to launch, an urgent message arrived from deep space scouts. The news sent a chill through every soldier's spine. The Hive was already moving. A massive force, larger than anything humanity had faced before, was heading straight for Earth. Billions of Hive creatures, thousands of ships. It was an invasion of unimaginable scale. Panic spread among the officers. If the Hive reached Earth before the mission succeeded, there would be no defense strong enough to stop them. General Kane clenched his fists. We don't have time. We launch now. The mission must succeed before they arrive. Captain Walker and his team boarded their ship, knowing what was at stake. Every second counted. Every moment brought the Hive closer to Earth. Failure was not an option. As their ship disappeared into the darkness of space, humanity held its breath, waiting for the outcome that would decide their future. The final battle. The Hive had arrived. Across space, the alien armada loomed like a storm of death. High ships darkened Earth's skies. Swarms of biomechanical creatures rained down, tearing through defenses. Cities burned, screams echoed. The war had reached its peak. General Marcus Kane stood in Earth's last command center, grim-faced as he watched the battle unfold. Every screen displayed chaos. Troops fighting, warships engage, civilians fleeing. Hold the lines, he ordered. We fight to the end. But deep down, he knew they couldn't win. Not like this. The Hive was too strong. Their only hope rested on the team that had infiltrated Sifos Prime. The infiltration. Captain Ryan Walker and his team had reached the Hive's homeworld. Sifos Prime was a nightmare, endless hives pulsed with alien life. The air was thick. The ground trembled as massive creatures moved. Every second was dangerous. Moving like shadows, they advanced. Lieutenant Avatores took point, sniper rifle ready. Sergeant Logan Reed carried explosives. Dr. Helena Voss studied their surroundings, searching for the Queen's exact location. The chamber should be ahead, she whispered. But something feels wrong. The Hive was aware of them. The walls seemed alive, shifting. Strange echoes filled the tunnels, glowing eyes watching from the darkness. Earth's struggle. Back on Earth, the situation was dire. The Hive overwhelmed the planet. Major cities, New York, London, Beijing, had fallen. Burning wreckage filled the sky. Giant Hive creatures rampaged, crushing everything. Admiral Sarah Leo commanded the last fleet in orbit. We need to buy them time, she said. Focus all fire on the motherships. Slow them down. Missiles and energy blasts lit the sky, but for every Hive ship destroyed, 10 more replaced it. Humanity was losing. The Queen's Chamber. Walker's team reached their destination. The Queen's Chamber was enormous, pulsing with eerie light. At its center sat the Queen. Massive, grotesque, glistening black skin, countless limbs, glowing red eyes. But the most terrifying part was her gaze. She had been expecting them. Foolish humans, her voice echoed in their minds. Did you think I would not see this coming? The chamber came alive. Hive creatures erupted from the walls, screeching. The trap had been set. The fight for survival. Walker shouted, "Hold your ground." Torres fired her sniper, taking down creatures. Reed tossed grenades, explosions ripping through the swarms. Voss searched desperately for the Queen's weak spot. The Queen screeched. The air trembled. The Hive moved faster. Walker dodged a clawed strike, rolling and firing. The battle was brutal. They had seconds before they were overwhelmed. Then Voss saw it. There, she pointed, the core beneath her chest. Walker didn't hesitate. Reed, give me everything you got. Reed strapped the last of his explosives together. All or nothing. With a final push, Walker charged, dodging the Queen's attacks. He threw the explosives at the glowing core. Fire in the hole. Reed hit the detonator. A massive explosion rocked the chamber. The queen let out a final, unearthly shriek as her body convulsed. Cracks spread through her form. Silence. The collapse. On Earth, everything changed. The Hive soldiers froze, movements erratic. War machines stopped. Ships lost control. The Hive was breaking apart. In the command center, General Kane whispered, "They did it." The queen was dead. Without her, the Hive collapsed. Human forces pushed back, reclaiming cities, destroying the now vulnerable creatures. The war was turning. The cost. Back on Sifos Prime, Walker's team barely escaped. The Hive world crumbled, its creatures dying. They ran to their extraction point, reaching their ship as the planet imploded. As they entered hyperspace, leaving the burning world behind, they knew one thing. Humanity had survived. The war was over. Victory or extinction. The battle was not over. Captain Ryan Walker and his team stood inside the Hive's core, breathing heavily. The Queen's chamber was a monstrous cavern, its walls pulsating with an eerie organic glow. The air was thick with the stench of alien life, and the sound of chittering filled the darkness. Despite their victory over the Queen's first form, the Hive was not done yet. "Stay sharp," Walker muttered, gripping his weapon. "She's not finished." From the shadows, movement stirred. The Queen's massive, broken body began to shift. Her wounds sealed with unnatural speed, and her limbs extended, twisting into new grotesque forms. Her red eyes blazed with fury. "Fools," her voice echoed in their minds. "Did you really think I could be killed so easily?" Thousands of drones poured into the chamber, crawling from the walls and ceiling, their razor-sharp claws glinting in the dim light. The team braced for the fight of their lives. The last stand. Lieutenant Avatores fired her sniper rifle, taking down drones with pinpoint accuracy. Sergeant Logan Reed hurled grenades, sending explosions rippling through the swarm. Dr. Helena Voss, injured but determined, typed frantically on her wrist device, searching for a way to disable the Queen's regeneration. But the Hive was relentless. Wave after wave of drones descended upon them, clawing, biting, screeching. Walker slashed through them with his plasma blade, but for every creature he killed, 10 more took its place. They were being overwhelmed. "There's no end to them," Reed shouted, struggling against a drone sinking its fangs into his armor. Voss suddenly gasped. "She's drawing power from the core itself. That's why she won't die. We have to destroy the entire planet." Walker's eyes widened. "Are you saying?" "Yes," Voss confirmed. "A chain reaction. We detonate our remaining explosives at the core's weakest point, and the planet will collapse." Reed hesitated. "That means we won't have time to escape." Walker clenched his jaw. "Then we make it count." A desperate plan. With no other choice, the team fought toward the core's unstable center. Torres provided cover fire, picking off drones before they could reach them. Reed rigged the last of their explosives, setting the countdown. The Queen let out a piercing scream. "You will die here, like all who stand against the Hive." She lunged at them, her massive form crashing down. Walker barely dodged, firing a volley of plasma rounds into her face. The Queen staggered but did not fall. "We're running out of time," Voss shouted. "Get clear." Walker turned to see Reed, still at the detonator, a grim smile on his face. "Go," Reed said. "I'll make sure this goes off." "No," Walker protested, but it was too late. Reed slammed his fist on the trigger. The end of the Hive. A blinding explosion erupted from the core, spreading like wildfire through the tunnels. The planet began to shake violently, cracks forming in the walls as molten energy spewed forth. The Queen let out a final, deafening shriek as fire consumed her, her body melting into nothingness. Walker grabbed Voss and Torres, dragging them toward their ship as the entire Hive world collapsed. The heat burned at their backs, the ground breaking apart beneath their feet. They barely made it. As their ship shot into hyperspace, Sifos Prime exploded behind them, shattering into fragments. The Hive's heart was destroyed. The aftermath. Back on Earth, silence fell across the battlefield. The Hive's forces, once unstoppable, suddenly collapsed. Their ships lost power. Their soldiers fell lifeless. Across the galaxy, Hive-controlled worlds were freed as their oppressors disintegrated. In the command center, General Marcus Kane watched the screens in disbelief. "They did it," he whispered. "They really did it." But victory had come at a terrible cost. Millions were dead. Entire cities lay in ruin. Whole planets had been lost before the battle had turned in humanity's favor. The war was over, but the scars would remain forever. One last question. As Walker, Torres, and Voss sat in their damaged ship, looking at the burning remains of Sifos Prime, a chilling thought crossed Walker's mind. Was this really the only Hive? Torres looked at him, fear flickering in her eyes. "You think there might be more?" Voss hesitated before answering. "We don't know. But if another queen exists somewhere, this war isn't truly over." Silence filled the cabin. Humanity had won this battle. But was the true war just beginning?